Everybody loves a really, really good David and Goliath story. And so I wanted to jump outside on this beautiful, almost spring-like day to tell you about one of my favorite David and Goliath stories. First of all, I'm loving what's in the background here. This pear tree has been keeping our sanity at the Clark house. How beautiful it looks as it's blossoming. And then this ball goal here in the cul-de-sac has been just a godsend. I love seeing our neighborhood kids come out and enjoy it. It's done our hearts good during this quarantine to see people outside and enjoying the sunshine when it's available. But to get back to that David and Goliath story, normally this time of the year, we're watching a lot of basketball. We're all hoping to see some really incredible upsets. And one of my favorite David and Goliath stories is in regards to my son Cameron. His junior year of high school at Community Christian Academy, they were not expected to, make a big ripple in the state tournament. They were able to go to the state tournament, and no one had expectations that they would do something amazing. But as it turns out, they absolutely did. They ended up going all the way to the state tournament championship and facing the best team in the state, in the KCAA, and they were the team that had hardly been beaten all year. They had a couple of amazing players, a couple of players, 2 or 3 players that were so big and so strong that they could dunk the ball easily. And so not a lot of people were giving Cameron's team, the CCA Crusaders, a chance to win that. And long story short, they ended up winning that game 62-60. It was an incredible experience. I remember being there in the stands, and one of the players, actually Chase Coomer, had like 30 points in the first half. He just couldn't miss. He just did his thing and was launching shots, and they were going in. And actually a very substantial lead existed in the first half. But as these stories often go, these teams are good for a reason. They slowly whittled away at our lead and eventually made a comeback and actually took the lead. But in the end, some of our role players jumped in and hit some big shots, hit some big free throws, and we ended up pulling out the victory 62-60. There's even a link online to the game that we posted it on YouTube. It's a pretty fun watch. But when I think about David and Goliath and I think about slaying giants, I think about this commemorative state championship shirt that was made. It's got the final score 62-60 on there. And then on the back of it, it just simply says Giant Killers Crusaders. Just a really cool reminder for those who were there to experience that though no one gave them a chance, they took down that giant in basketball fashion, in March Madness fashion. Now, we're talking about this because we're looking at 1 Samuel 17 together, this wonderful story that so many people have heard of David literally slaying a giant named Goliath. And that account is, to me, remarkable because it's just neat to see how it all unfolded. This giant for 40 days was defying the armies of Israel. And then little young David comes along and just bringing a lunch to his brothers. And he's like, why are you guys scared of this guy? We have God on our side. There's no way he can win. And when King Saul heard of this, he summoned David and ends up giving David permission to take on the giant. A funny part of this story is how Saul tried to put his own armor on David, and I just can picture it being too big, too heavy, too weird, too awkward. And David's like, I can't do any of this. I can't use any of this stuff. And so instead, David just wears what he normally wears as a shepherd. And he gathers 5 stones and his sling, and he takes on the giant. And it's a really great spiritual truth. You don't have to be someone that you're not. You just have to use what God has given you. That's what it takes to slay a giant. You don't have to just become something that you are not. When I think back at that basketball game that my son played in, the CCA Crusaders, they just did what they did best. And they did it well, and it ended up resulting in victory. And the same was true of David. David was used to being a great shepherd. And it brings me to another truth. When David was having this conversation with King Saul, he said to the king, the same God that delivered me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear can slay this giant. He looked back at what God had already done in his life and how he had seen God prevail and grant victory and grant favor. And he believed that God could do it again. And that's the biggest truth of the story that we get from David and Goliath is believe that what God has done before, He can do again. We must believe that. And especially during this virus crisis, we got to look back on what God has done, not just in our own lives, but in the history of humanity. He has healed diseases. He has conquered giants. He has parted Red Seas. He has done so many wonderful things. He can do anything. And the question is really, do you believe that? And do I believe that? And that's why this is so important, is really what that does in us. Because the most important thing that comes out of a crisis is a heart that believes in and loves God. That's the most important thing. And I think that that's what's probably the greatest silver lining in this virus crisis, in this great quarantine. It is my hope and prayer that souls are turning towards and seeking God like never before, because that is where our hope lies. That is where our strength lies. And honestly, we were not built for this world. We were built for eternity with Him. And God's greatest desire is to do whatever it takes to bring us into a relationship with Him so that we can spend eternity with Him in a new heaven and a new earth. It's no accident that later on David wrote Psalm 23, this beautiful song that at one point says, "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me." The presence of God, it's everything. The most important thing that we need to get us through anything, the most important thing any human being could ever have, is the continual presence of God in their life. That's important. And right now, that is what people need, whether they realize it or not. That's what they need more than anything else. And so I encourage you to take the Small Group Leader Guide as a family, or even as a small group that might be meeting on Zoom meetings or on Facebook Messenger meetings, or maybe you're just going to text each other after watching this video. But again, maybe you're watching this as a family. There's some great questions there for you to discuss that talk about these truths. And also, I can't leave this out. If you're watching this video and you have never placed your faith in Jesus Christ, again, His continual presence in your life is what you need most. And He offers it freely to you because He sent His Son Jesus to die for you, to pay the price for all of our sins, so that sin doesn't get in the way between us and Him anymore. All we have to do is do what it says in Romans 10:13. Call on the name of the Lord and we will be saved. And so that the greatest giant that needs slayed is whatever separates us from God Himself. That's the biggest giant that needs to be slayed. What is that? Is it just you doubting? Is it just you have fear to becoming religious? Maybe you're afraid of what people think. Maybe it's just a lack of belief. But maybe through all that we've gone through at this moment, at this time, now you are ready to take that big step of faith and put your trust in Jesus. If that's you, I encourage you, right as soon as this video is over, just call on the name of the Lord and say, "Jesus, save me. Come into my heart. Make me your child forever." And the Bible says, whoever calls on the name of the Lord will be saved. You immediately become a child of God forever and ever and ever. And no matter what comes, no matter what the end result of this virus crisis is, what matters most is that you have God's continual presence with you now and for the rest of eternity. Thanks so much for watching, and let's go slay a giant together with God's help.